Good afternoon. You're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Jes Delos Santos. Kicking off this afternoon's broadcast with more than 200 billion pesos in foreseen economic losses following the government's decision to put Metro Manila under enhanced community quarantine for 2 weeks from August 6 to 20. Economic Planning Secretary Carl Kendrick Chua says each week with NCR under ECQ would cost the economy 105 billion pesos. It could also render more than 400,000 people jobless. Malacanang earlier said a 1,000 peso cash aid will be given to select households under ECQ areas. The budget department is ordered to source funds for the financial assistance. Despite tighter restrictions, the palace says vaccination efforts will continue. The health department says it can provide the 4 million vaccine supply doses Metro Manila mayors are asking once ECQ kicks off in NCR. Meanwhile, starting tomorrow, both indoor and outdoor dining will be prohibited in Metro Manila. Only takeouts and food deliveries will be allowed. Metro Manila mayors will discuss the next steps following the announcement of ECQ in the region for 2 weeks in August. MMDA Chairman Benro Abalo says the council will meet tonight to coordinate matters with the national government, including plans to vaccinate 4 million residents during the lockdown period. Meanwhile, the Octa Research Group welcomes the government's decision to impose preemptive restrictions in NCR to curb rising COVID-19 cases. Business groups are also bracing for the 2 week ECQ, calling it a necessary move to counter a more damaging scenario once the Delta variant spreads. The Management Association of the Philippines calls for increased vaccine supply and inoculation during the period. The group calls on government to open vaccination to the general public to quickly reach immunization targets. The Federation of Filipino Chinese Chambers of Commerce and Industry says the 2 week lockdown would be a sacrificial move on the part of businesses so that fourth quarter operations could proceed without problems. The return to ECQ sent shares into a tailspin. Look at the trend share that formed mid-session after new restrictions were announced, immediately sending the PSEi lower by 1.1%. If we can just show the charts right here. But that didn't stop there. Just right before close, you have the dive worsening with a 3.5% slump to 6,270.23. This is a PSEi's sharpest drop yet in 6 months. The last time we were in this level was back in May. Now, Claire Alviar of Philstocks Financial said the lockdown is a necessary step and that it's best to implement it now rather than deal with the infections when infections have already worsened. But she admitted that more revenue loss would impact shares negatively. Looking at our leaders and laggards, only 4 advancers today out of the 13 members, including Emperador, which has just reported good numbers for the first half. Again, Emperador, one of a few stocks in the green here, up over 2% to 13 pesos and 98 centavos a share. But the worst decliner here, the country's biggest food and drinks manufacturer, San Miguel, experiencing an 8% slump to 104 apiece. Mall operator Ayala Land, not far behind after it sank 7% to 32 pesos and 70 centavos. Other companies set to be affected by the curves also making huge declines. You have SM Investments, URC, SM Prime, and even restaurant operator Jollibee, all in the negative territory. Jollibee, for one, tanked by 3.6% to 190 a share. Now, question is, how might this affect growth? Well, Yuben Paracuelos of Nomura Holdings told Bloomberg that this further reinforces their view that the Philippines' recovery will lag ASEAN peers, especially with vaccination remaining slow. He says this move looks more draconian and goes straight to the most stringent measures and hence is a bit of a surprise. Now, certain corners of the private sector have been vocal about their support for a stricter lockdown in the next 2 weeks, preferring curbs sooner rather than later, but with NCR already in ECQ beginning August 6, rather. Is that what Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship Joey Concepcion had in mind when he backcalls for a lockdown? Let's find out from him. Joey Concepcion joins us on the show. Good afternoon, Sir Joey. All right, Sir Joey, I would just like to check your audio. I think you are on mute.
Sorry, it was on mute.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Is this what you were backing since experts called for a circuit breaker lockdown, a return to ECQ for Metro Manila? Is this what you had in mind, or is this ECQ stricter than what you had anticipated?
Well, I think, we were looking forward to an ECQ that was implemented in March, no? But they still have to define this ECQ, and it's still being crafted, no, as to the specifics of how strict will this lockdown be. But yes, when Okta called for it, I felt that we would like to look at the data, and we did. And as you know, I've been saying this, that my role as an advisor to the president is to really help our MSMEs thrive through this pandemic. And what I don't want to see is that if we have a lockdown in the fourth quarter, the damage to our MSMEs and even the economy will be much more severe, because we all know that the last quarter is when things really pick up. All businesses pick up, tourism, everything. Assuming it's open, it all picks up. And that's because you have the Christmas season in. Of course, you have the trickling of the election spending as people want to start their campaigns. I mean, you'll see that already. I mean, the LGUs will start to support their constituents. And of course, the continued support on the stimulus packages that the government has brought. But what is more important is confidence. No? If the lockdown happened in the fourth quarter, I'm not saying the lockdown may not happen once you do this first lockdown. But what is important is that you are able to mute the virus, the Delta virus, which we all know is different from the previous variants, right? This is more infectious. This is highly transmissible. We've seen it in all the ASEAN countries. It is really moving fast, and many of them are struggling to contain it. So no other country has been able to contain it without a lockdown. So the choice is either we do it now while the cases are still manageable, or do we do it later on at the last quarter when the cases are so huge and it will take time to simmer down. No?
Now, you mentioned earlier, Sir Joey, that you have authorities still drafting the guidelines here for the implementation of the ECQ. In fact, you have the Metro Manila Council meeting later tonight. What would you like to see in those guidelines?
Well, I think what's very important to see is that our vaccination program for the private sector should continue. I was sharing with Chairman Avalos earlier that 1.1 million of these ASA vaccines are being deployed right now to our employees as we speak. And we intend to finish that within the next 4 weeks. No? Close to 600 companies who purchase AstraZeneca vaccines are now deploying that. And that will help increase the number of people being vaccinated in NCR and the Calabar area. No? And we have another 1.2 million doses coming on August 8 to 12 for the second batch of AstraZeneca vaccines. No? So that is, I think, very important. Actually, if you really look at it, this is a race between the Delta virus and the national government, our efforts, and the private sector in reaching the unvaccinated people. No? Who will be first? Will the virus affect the unvaccinated, or we will be able to get to the unvaccinated first? So it's a race. Now, how do we get to be in the to reach the unvaccinated first? Is we have to slow down the virus through a lockdown like this, no? And we have to deploy the vaccines immediately so that we can vaccinate the unvaccinated. We don't want to turn this out as the pandemic of the unvaccinated. We want to save the lives of our unvaccinated people.
Question is, do we have enough supply here for the next 3 weeks to actually ramp up vaccination?
Well, according to Secretary Galvez, yes, the demand has gone up, so the supply is catching up, and he is confident that more supply is coming in. You've seen arrivals of Sinovac You have our AstraZeneca that we are deploying. That's still about 1 million doses being deployed right now. You have another batch coming in on August, between August 8 to 12. So that will fit in right in on spot with on the ongoing efforts here. That's a huge number, over 1 million. And I'm told that Moderna vaccines, about 300,000 is coming in soon. So from the private sector side, you have maybe about 2 million plus. And then from the government side, maybe another, they promised to give the NCR mayors the 4 million. So that's enough to hit population protection by then. No? That's important to hit at least 50% of NCR should be vaccinated. And that's the goal. No?
Okay, now this time around, Sir Joey, based on the guidelines that the palace at least has released earlier, you have additional restrictions already kicking in by midnight, and then that's before we get to ECQ on August 6th. In fact, you will see closures for both indoor and outdoor dining starting tonight as well. Essentially, that's 3 weeks of stricter mobility curbs. Last night, you told the big story. You support a maximum of 2 weeks for lockdowns. This current decision fit the mold. Can the sector afford a 3-week stricter mobility curves?
Actually, the current protocol right now, which is we're in GCQ, is still in force. No? What they're increasing is they're restricting restaurants from dine-in, etc. No? Now, it just shows really that the numbers that I think were presented were numbers that were quite frightening. No? And I think what the government is trying to do is to try to act immediately. Because if these numbers were not at that level, they would not raise the bar even for the current quarantine status we have. So they have added heightened restrictions. I would have been okay with just 2 weeks of ECQ and the current 1 week we have today. But I guess they've seen the numbers and they are also very much concerned, as we were at that time when we recommended that we should lock down soon while it's still early. So we will support their moves. My only request is that we allow the fully vaccinated people who have at least 2 full doses of vaccine to be able to move out, no, and do what they have to do. Anyway, that's why we gave them the vaccine. So I believe that, and hopefully they would consider that, to give mobility to the fully vaccinated people. No?
By mobility, sir, can we be more exact here? What at least are you expecting? What kind of leeway at least are you expecting for those who are fully vaccinated during the ECQ period?
Well, for example, going to work, that's one. Public transportation, certain areas that may be restricted. They are maybe they may. I don't know if all restaurants will be closed. If some restaurants are allowed to open, maybe they consider fully vaccinated people only in these restaurants that may be allowed to open. What I'm just trying to say is that we should allow the vaccinated people greater mobility.
Okay, now also you have NEDA projecting 440,000 to actually go jobless during the period. And the government's still on the lookout here for funding sources when it comes to Ayuda. Which sectors do you deem will be most affected, and what preparations are these industries doing ahead of ECQ?
Well, for example, the retail sector, the restaurants, of course, but the restaurants today, which are operating at 20% capacity plus 10, are already hardly making money, no? And the malls are subsidizing them with the rent. All of these are challenges that we face today, no? What we're trying to see is that we have a new variant at bay. Now, do we just allow this to continue or do we nip it? And I think the decision is right to hit it while it's still not moving aggressively and vaccinate. And the way I look at it, down the road, more people will want to be vaccinated if they see that the vaccinated people are well protected. And here, it's you've seen it all over the world. Those that have taken the vaccine are really insulated from severe infection and hospitalization and even death. No, So that what we don't want this to turn out to is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, and that's why we really have to protect our unvaccinated people from going out, from being infected, because then they will fill up the capacities of the hospital. So this is also for their own good, and for those who have not taken the vaccine and are now taking it during this period, they should be allowed to take the vaccine, and we should make it easy for them.
Okay. Now, Sir Joey, do you think that this current scenario wherein we are imposing ECQ in Metro Manila, do you think this reinforces the need for Bayanihan 3?
I don't know. I think we should let this play out and see what happens. It may need it. But to me, I look at it. Imagine if we get hit in the fourth quarter, definitely you'll really need a bigger stimulus package, because it hits it right at the center when basically 35% of our whole year's activity is centered on that last quarter. So so what we're trying to do here is ensure that the last quarter, which is the strongest quarter, which leads to the year 2022, that people move on to the year 2022 with great hope, great confidence, and that they are able to recover whatever they lost in the previous 3 quarters in the last quarter. And that's what we're trying to save here. And of course, we're trying to save lives of our unvaccinated people. That's the most important. By doing this, you are saving lives of the unvaccinated people. We are now able to get the vaccines first to the unvaccinated rather than Delta hitting them. So it's a race between the enemy, which is Delta, and the good guys between the government and the private sector bringing the vaccines to the unvaccinated. And we have to win that race.
Okay, Sir Joey, last question here before we let you go, and very quickly now, what should be the post-ECQ strategy here after the 20th? What changes should be done, especially in the way economic activity is carried out?
Well, first thing, until we hit herd immunity, there should be no let up. We should ensure that adequate supply of vaccines do arrive, and we achieve herd immunity even more so before the end of the year. And I think that should be our goal, especially in NCR Plus. Because beyond NCR Plus, there are other areas that we have to help as well. But we have to succeed in NCR Plus for us to be able to succeed in the other areas around the Philippines. Because they are also starting to feel the Delta variant encroach in their area. So we must succeed in NCR Plus to show that this can be done.
All right. Thank you very much again for your time this afternoon. Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship, Joey Concepcion. Thank you, sir. And those are the biggest stories this trading day, July 30, 2021. Catch Business World Live again Monday next week at 9:30 a.m. for the market open and 3:15 p.m. for the market close. I'm Jes Delos Santos. We are One News. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. Have a great weekend.